Hey everyone! So today we are diving into some really fascinating ideas in international relations called critical theories. Now think about it this way. If traditional theories are like that standard world map we've all seen a million times, then critical theories, well, they're like a whole new set of maps. Maps that shows a completely different terrain, the hidden landscapes of power, justice, and inequality. So let's unfold these new maps and see what they show us. Here's our game plan for this journey. First, we'll get our bearings by looking beyond the standard map. Then we're going to pick up 3 really powerful new lenses to look through, one for class, one for identity, and one for history. And finally, we'll bring it all together and open up the critical toolbox to see what all these powerful ideas really have in common. All right, so first things first, moving beyond that standard map. Before we can really appreciate these new perspectives, we got to have a quick look at what the traditional view of the world looks like. And, more importantly, what it might be missing. In this slide, this really gets to the heart of the shift. On one side, you've got the mainstream view. It sees the world as a giant chessboard, right? All about states, power, and national interest. But the critical view asks us to look under the chessboard, to see the hidden structures, the deep-seated inequality, the real struggles for justice, and all the voices that usually get ignored in that grand game of nations. And this brings us to the central question that really drives all of these theories. I mean, what if the real action, the stuff that truly shapes everything, isn't just happening on the surface between countries, but in these hidden structures that we just take for granted? That's exactly what we're here to find out. So the first new lens we're going to pick up is all about class. This perspective, which has its roots in Marxist thought, basically argues that if you really want to understand global politics, you've got to follow the money. You've got to map out the economic structures that hold everything up. Okay, so the crucial shift to understand here is the focus. A Marxist lens doesn't really see a world of competing countries, like the US versus China. No, it sees a world of competing economic classes. And in this view, states aren't some kind of neutral referee. They're actually tools used by the dominant capitalist class to protect and grow its own interests around the globe. And building on that idea, you get theories that map the whole world based on economic roles. So picture the world in 3 tiers. You've got the wealthy, industrialized nations at the core. Then you have the periphery countries, which mostly supply raw materials. And stuck in the middle is the semi-periphery. The key insight here is that the whole system is built to pump wealth from the periphery up to the core, which creates this cycle of dependency that is just incredibly hard to break out of. So, what this all boils down to is a really powerful tool for analysis. Anytime you look at a global event, a trade deal, a conflict, you name it, this lens pushes you to ask one very simple, very direct question. Who profits from this? Okay, let's put down the class lens and pick up our second one. This one shifts our focus from money and class over to identity, and specifically to gender. The feminist perspective says, hey, our traditional map has made half the world's population practically invisible. So what happens when we start to draw them back in? So what feminist IR theory basically says is that for centuries, the way we've understood the world has been profoundly male-centric. International relations has been obsessed with war, diplomacy, and big-shot politics, all spheres traditionally run by men, while pretty much completely ignoring the roles, the experiences, and the security of women and other marginalized genders. And this just highlights a massive blind spot, right? Traditional theories are all about the guys around the table, the diplomats, the generals. But feminism says, wait a minute, let's look at everyone else. It forces us to think about the security of a family in their home, not just the security of the state. It makes us analyze not just tanks, but the use of sexual violence as a weapon of war. It takes these hidden realities from the sidelines and puts them right at the center of the conversation. And this brings us to another one of those simple but absolutely game-changing questions. When you're looking at any situation, could be a peace deal or a corporate boardroom, just ask, where are the women? And what changes if we start our analysis from their point of view? All right, for our third and final lens, we're going to look back through history. The post-colonial perspective argues that you just cannot understand the world as it is today without first understanding the incredibly long shadow cast by colonialism. The core idea here is really powerful. Just because a country got its formal independence, that didn't magically erase centuries of domination. Post-colonial theory shows us how the economic, cultural, and political systems that were built during the colonial era are very much still with us, and they continue to shape the power dynamics between the global north and the global south. So this way of thinking does a few really crucial things. First, it pulls back the curtain on how much of what we call universal knowledge is actually Eurocentric. It's based on European history, European values. Second, it shines a light on how former colonies are often still locked in economic relationships that look a lot like the old colonial ones. And third, it's actively trying to decolonize our thinking by putting the stories and perspectives from the global south, from Latin America, Africa, and Asia, front and center. And that's why this lens forces us to ask a really fundamental question whenever we hear a story about the world. Whose history is this? Are we only getting the version told by the winners, by the colonizers, or are we actually making room for the whole complex story? Okay, so we've looked through three very different lenses: class, identity, and history. Now, let's open up the toolbox and see what ties them all together. What is it that makes them all critical theories? What's so cool here is their shared DNA. Every one of these theories starts by rejecting the idea that the world just is the way it is. They all deliberately focus on the people who are usually left out of the main story. They all point out that the problem isn't just a few bad apples, but that the system itself is biased. And this is the most important part. They are all fundamentally hopeful. They believe that by understanding these hidden structures, we can actually change them and build a more just world. And there's this fantastic quote from a scholar named Robert Cox that just nails it. He said, "Theory is always for someone and for some purpose. No theory is neutral. It either works to prop up the existing world order, the status quo, or it works to challenge it and help create something new. Critical theories? Well, they are explicitly in the business of challenging the status quo." So after looking through all these different maps and all these different lenses, what's the main idea we should walk away with? Why does any of this matter? Well, the bottom line is that these lenses just give us a much richer, more complete picture of our world. They show us the hidden power dynamics that mainstream theories tend to skate right over. They remind us that international politics is about people, real human beings, not just abstract states on a map. They challenge us to imagine a better future. And they save us from the danger of believing there's only one simple story about how the world works. And that's where I want to leave it, really. We've given you a new set of maps, a new set of lenses. The real question is for you. The next time you see a headline about some global event, try looking at it through one of these lenses, of class or identity or history. What do you see differently now? Thanks for tuning in.